Hi everyone, this is the follow-up to my previous video where I talked about my deck that came in joint first in a recent small local tournament. Today I'll be talking about the corp side of things, which is Tennin Institute. I decided to play this deck because I found it to be pretty reliable, and reliable it sure was, because during this tournament this deck went completely undefeated, and what really amazed me was that the other guy who came in joint first with me, his top deck was also Tennin Institute, with a slightly different build, but with the same concept of using Trick of Light to fast advance agendas. So today I'll be explaining why I think Tennin Institute is very strong in today's meta game. I find that it's very difficult to counter a good Tennin opponent. Now that being said, even though this deck went undefeated, I still only played against two distinct IDs this entire tournament because it was such a small event. I played against Noise and Ken Express, Tenma. They both presented their own unique challenges, but in the end I was able to overcome it and score my points before they managed to lock me down. I think one big reason why I managed to win against these two IDs was that both of them packed account siphons and were very reliant on hitting the first siphon and snowballing from there on out. Noise with account siphon is pretty annoying because Noise has so many means of siphon recursion that if he manages to get in once, you are going to lose the game. Same thing with Ken, except that Ken also has the Ken that I play against had a lot of tricks up his sleeve, like medium and vamp as well. So an account siphon followed by a vamp is absolutely crippling. But Tennin Institute is one of the best IDs well equipped to deal with account siphon because it is very easy to lock the runner out of HQ. And if your deck is completely reliant on getting into HQ, and I manage to prevent you from doing so, I instantly win the game. So now I'll just explain in general why Tennin Institute is so strong. For a typical corp deck, it needs to focus on defending 4 servers: HQ, R&D, Archives, and the remote server, where typically your economic assets go, such as the Donis campaign, or your agendas, which is probably more common. With Tennin Institute, you have absolutely no need to set up this remote, which means that not only are you can you dedicate more eyes to your central servers, but more importantly, you actually prevent some of the most powerful runner cards in terms of click efficiency, gaining lots of cards or lots of credits for a single click. The likes of Bank Job, Security Testing, John Masanori, and Dirty Laundry can all exploit a naked asset that is placed on the table or a lightly defended remote server. With Tennin Institute, since I'm not going to set up a remote server at all, no runner will be able to take advantage of any of these cards. So now with my eyes completely focused on 3 servers, I'm going to narrow it down even more, because you don't really need to defend Archives all that much. In fact, most of the games I find that I can get away with a single piece of ice over Archives, most ideally a Yagura or a Pup, which just costs 4, the rest costs 1. You get to tax the runner so heavily. If they want to keep running Archives every turn to stop you from gaining your ID ability, they either have to pay 2 in the case of Pup, or for Yagura, take 1 net damage and allow me to filter through my R&D, both of which are huge losses that most runners cannot afford to give up. And they get to access Archives, which usually nets them nothing. For the better runners, they have some options available in terms of Archives access. Noise allows virus milling, which means that he may or may not get agendas from Archives. Sneak Beta is obviously one of the, if not the best way to exploit and expose Archives. And there's of course Security Testing and Notoriety, more of a niche card, but something to worry nonetheless. As mentioned in my runner video, I think one strong trait of runner decks these days is the ability to exploit an undefended Archives, as more and more decks seem to run Ice-like. Correspondingly, a strong corp deck must be able to afford to spend some time and resources dedicating ice to the Archives. The Tennin deck that came in joint first with me, played by the other guy, defended Archives in a different manner. He used Shocks and Shikus instead, which is also equally effective, although it does not prevent against Sneak Beta, but against everything and Security Testing for that matter. But otherwise, it's also a very good deterrent, and more importantly, I think that has its merits because you can actually stash agendas pretty safely in Archives if the runner is very scared of Shocks. Essentially, I only need to spend 1 or 2 eyes on Archives at most, so every single other piece of ice that I draw goes to HQ or R&D. So this allows me to run very ice-light. I do not need more than 16 pieces of ice in my deck. 16 or 17 is roughly the amount you want for an ice-light deck. And it's not really ice-light in the sense that I'm defending my servers lightly. In fact, most of my games I end up having a 3 or 4 stack HQ and a 3 stack R&D, which makes it very taxing for the runner to run. This is completely intentional. It's unlike most NBN decks actually, where they try to get away with a couple of pieces of ice. Here I'm just stacking ice until you can't get in, and I don't need like 20 plus pieces of ice in my deck to do so. This is very good because I can dedicate more card slots to more important cards, which I will discuss later. So, as I was speaking about taxing ice, Jinteki has received new weapons in Honor and Profit for killing the runner, but more importantly, I find that Jinteki Ice is extremely taxing. But first, let's look at where I spend my influence on. Eli and Ice Wall. No brainers. Eli is, until today, in my opinion, the best ice in the game. For just 1 influence, you get a 3 rest cost, 4 strength barrier that has 2 subroutines. It is incredible. There is no good answer to this piece of ice short of a Morning Star. And good luck trying to include a Morning Star in your deck. For Ice Wall, it's basically a big middle finger to Artman decks. Ice Wall really screws over anything that relies on fixed strength, and it also chases parasites away, because once the Ice Wall is advanced past 3 or 4, you are not going to parasite it down. I'll simply clear virus counters when it gets too dangerous, and you have to spend a lot of time getting your parasite back up. For the Jinteki Ice, as I was talking about, the super taxing ice, because all of them have more than 1 subroutine, and it is the number of subroutines that tax the runner, especially when you're thinking about Artman decks or your traditional breakers, Corroder, Gordian Blade. All these cost 1 credit per subroutine. Sometimes the strength doesn't matter, so it ends up being the subroutines that really tax the runner. Inazuma, 5 strength code gate, and more importantly, turns on Grim and forces out that code gate breaker, which Grim might end up eating anyway. Grim, as I was saying, very strong card, and it might be counterintuitive to include Grim in a text deck, but with Clone Retirement, it's not a problem at all for me. And of course, the 2 incredibly taxing pieces of Jinteki Ice, Pup and Yagura. 1 rest cost, 2 subroutines. Fantastic stuff. They are both 0 strength, which means that they are instant kills with Parasite, but I don't really care. In fact, I'm more than happy to see a Parasite take down one of these ice, because that's 1 less Parasite dedicated to Tsurugi, which is the mother of all ice, in my opinion. 4 subroutines, good luck getting past that without a fairy. Alright, so that's my ice. Now, I won't talk too much about the rest of my cards. My agenda composition is very standard, and so are my economy cards, Trick of Light, Jackson Howard, etc. I'll talk about the more interesting cards in my deck. Firstly, the fast track that I included at the last minute, because I thought that it would do a very good job in fishing out the 2-2 medical breakthrough. Turns out that I didn't need to use it a single time this tournament. In fact, it was a liability when the opponent had 4 points of agenda scored, 2 different medical breakthroughs. So I knew that I had 1 more medical breakthrough in my deck that was 2 advanceable. I was on match point at 5 points, so I decided to bait him into making a very inequitable run on HQ. My HQ was 4 stacked with lots of expensive ice, so I decided to fish out my medical breakthrough and dare him to come into HQ, may I say. So all he did, and that was a very obvious play. I completely saw that coming, and I should have known that he would absolutely do that. If you notice, all my ice is completely porous. So all he did was to, same old thing, a leg work, click through the Eli. All the other ice didn't really matter to him, and he came in on my 5 card hand. He had a 60% chance to snipe off my last medical breakthrough, and that he did. So that was a very stupid play by me. Somehow or another, I ended up winning the game, but I really didn't deserve to after that very stupid play. So yeah, fast track, it can be as much of a liability as it can be a boon. I can see it definitely being useful, but it's definitely not something I'll include more than 1 off in my deck. Next, Sansan City Grid, another 1 off in my deck. This synergizes well with my theme of taxing the runner. If you want to stop me from fast advancing my agendas, you'd better run this and trash it for 5, which means less credits to run my central servers. That's a good thing for me, and it's well worth the 3 influence cost. One thing that many people overlook is that in my deck, because I'm running Plan B Mushin Oshin, I can actually Mushin Oshin out a Plan B and protect my Sen underneath that Plan B. So if they run the Plan B, I get to freely advance score an agenda. If they don't, I can still score with Sen City Grid anyway. This interaction didn't come into play, but it was something that I had in the back of my mind all the time. What did come into play, however, was a funny combo that I pulled off for the very first time, and that was a double Trick of Light into a Future Perfect on the rare Sen City Grid. So without any installed assets agendas at all, I could go from 0 to 5 advance to scoring a 3-pointer in a single turn. That is so scary. And yeah, being able to score a 3-pointer just like that in one turn made my life so much more easier for the rest of the game, knowing that I only had to score 2 more 2-pointer agendas to win the game or get 2 clone retirements out. So yeah, that's really huge, being able to score like that. And it's a reason why you should always contest a Sensen, even if it's unrest. So moving on to what I mentioned earlier, Mushin Oshin and Plan B. You've seen my deck before, you know that I pack this, but apparently most runners don't. Most of them keep thinking of Aggressive Secretary or Cerebral Overwriters, but they fail to account for this new Honor and Profit card. Well, it's not that new, but well, every time I Mushin Oshin out a Plan B, every single time they run into it, every single time I get a free agenda to score. And obviously that contributes to my winning against them. So what makes Mushin Oshin and Plan B so good? Well, it's simple. Against unwary runners, it provides a huge advantage. As I said, being able to score 2 more points is something I take any day. An advantage that is very difficult to overcome. On the other hand, if the runner is completely aware of what's happening, maybe I'm playing them in the playoffs and they have seen me pull this trick off before, it still is a benefit to me because those 3 advancement tokens are still usable for Trick of Light shenanigans. And more importantly, when I'm on match point, they still have to contest the Plan B because it could be me pulling off a 3 advanced Drain Trust or Mega Breakthrough. That's a very important thing to note when trying to find ambushes to play competitively. You need to pick ambushes such that they give you a win-win situation, whether or not the runner runs it. Many times, if you play a Junebug and double advance it, if the runner doesn't run it, you've just lost a lot of time and effort for nothing. But in this case, Mushin Oshin Plan B allows me to win against any runner, even whether they are prepared for it or not. The only thing they can do to counter this is to completely change their deck by including Exploratory Romp, and most runners don't do that. So it's as much of a meta call as it is strategic choice, and it's definitely something to consider. Creating win-win situations for yourself reliably. If you can't do that, maybe you shouldn't be playing ambushes because unreliable stuff tend to not get you very far in tournament play. So I believe that's it for my deck explanation. All in all, I recall that in my preliminary analysis of Jinteki On and Profit IDs, I said that Harmony MedTech would be by far the strongest of the 3 new IDs, and Tennin Institute is way too janky and has way too many limitations to make work. However, after experiencing such success with my Tennin deck, I really have to eat my words, gobble them up all the way down my throat, because Tennin Institute really is a force to be reckoned with. You either have to win it early or have some way of getting through the taxing servers when it comes to the mid-late game. Otherwise, you're just sitting there like a sitting duck waiting for the Tennin player to play out their hand to find the Trick of Lights to eventually, inevitably win the game, as I did that many times. So it was a very enjoyable tournament, and I got to see so much more of the local scene, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Once again, I'm very grateful for the game store owners who kindly organized the tournament and for the very friendly players around. It only reaffirms my perception of the gaming community, which is one very kind one. And I hope to participate in more such events in the future. And I beg all of you viewers to do the same, because until you try a tournament out for yourself, no matter your skill level, you won't know what you're missing out on. Thanks for watching once again, and I hope you found this insightful. See you around.